thing on. Aha. I found the chat. Aha, there we go. Are you seriously in Antarctica? Because that would be awesome. How do I close this window? Pardon me one moment. Aha! Get rid of you. Okay. Hello. Let's see. What's going on? Oh, no. Move that cable. Hello, Awkward Quokka. Hello, Handsome Beast. Hello, Ben Judy. Hello, The Shrimp Father? That is a fabulous handle. I was trying to figure out stuff. Right. Well, what's going on this evening is I'm sorting darts. This is my dart catching bin from my dart net over here where I do all my testing. So these darts will just be going back into the shop bins and used in future videos, and then I will be sorting the darts from our last big Nerf event here in the Pacific Northwest before the cold and the damp sets in. Our last Borst game was unfortunately rained out, so we didn't have the last Borst game. Instead, our last event ended up being down in Portland at the mall. So we did have the last mall event for the year. Since it was indoors, the weather didn't matter. Borst was under flood advisory that day, or the day of our last event, so we didn't end up having it. But it went well. It went smooth. We had a good turnout. We all the games got run. We actually stayed on schedule. We did pretty much run everyone ragged because the whole last couple, 2 hours or so, was all HVZ. And so by the end of it, people were pretty much done, which was kind of the goal. So I won't be doing any more major travel for the rest of the year, hopefully. The next trip I have planned is to Phoenix, Arizona in late January. Hello, Jay Holter. Hello, Schneiders? Schneiders. Quesadilling. That is a good thing to be doing on a Friday evening. I don't know how far I'll get into this darts. I have three hampers full of darts to sort. Luckily, there's less variety in there, and the variety matters less because that's all loner darts. So there's pretty much full-length darts, half-length darts, and rival. And that's pretty much it. The only other stuff that might be in there are some Mega and some Mega XL, but that's really easy to sort. This bin is all manner of chaos and misagash. And the darts that I have here in my shop are typically more sorted. I have no idea how or why there is so much... why there are so many elite darts in here. I don't remember firing anything with elite darts. Doesn't mean I didn't, it just means I don't remember it. I mean, I don't remember what I had for breakfast, so... that doesn't mean a whole lot. What do we got going on? Good evening. Hello, So Sharp David. What are all of y'all's plans for Thanksgiving? Will there be a good and proper glut at your place? Family coming? Will there be any nerfing? There is an inordinate amount of waffle heads in here because I was testing the Moab. And that you tend to test 100 darts at a time. Because that's 2 seconds worth of firing. Do I think the Moab belt has potential? Yeah. There's no reason people couldn't design blasters to take that belt. What I really anticipate somebody doing is making half dart shells, which all you would have to do is cut down the Moab shells or not print them as high, because somebody in the comments mentioned that it's kind of odd that they went with full-length shells, and I don't disagree. Full-length darts don't fly as far because they've got more, typically don't fly as far because they have more mass. And they're not getting enough energy to really make use of their inertia. Half darts would have taken half the filament to print the same amount of shells. Would have made the backpack lighter and smaller and svelter. But there's no reason you couldn't just make half dart links for it and then make a blaster that fires half darts instead of full length darts. A lot of people asked if you could put 2 half darts in each shell and have it fire 2 at a time, and according to the designer, not really. It leads to a lot more jams, apparently, which kind of surprised me. That wasn't what I was expecting to be the result. But just the way the shells are designed, most half darts aren't actually exactly the half length of a dart. They're a little more, and so if you put 2 of them, it would have been too tall. And if any amount of dart is sticking out from the top of the shell, it's going to jam the blaster. So you would need the shorter short darts, and then you might be able to double load them. Let's see. Painting my Spectrum, practice guitar, eat food. We have a proper spread. Excellent, excellent. Purchase stuff to rewire. Good plan. How many darts do I fire? I have absolutely no idea. No, I don't even know how I would begin to estimate that. Because I haven't the foggiest idea how many darts I have. At Mall Madness alone, I fired over 1,000 rounds. It's real easy to get that number up real high when you're firing miniguns and proton packs and other high capacity things. It also is going to vary wildly from year to year because there were a couple of there was one year when we went to Afterworlds and we fired 10,000 rounds in a battle. Because it was just nothing but proton packs fighting everyone at Afterworlds except the 14 people we were trying to rescue and a handful of crew. But we all had proton packs and we all ran out of ammo. It was an epic showdown, and so that is going to massively skew the numbers, because there are years when I don't ever have the opportunity to do multiple tank dumps with a proton pack, and then there's years when I do. Like Survival Fest, I fired like 10 rounds the whole game because I got turned in Mission 1, which happens even to the best of us. And I'm definitely not the best anymore. I'm old and I'm slow. I've gotten tired and careless. I mean, yeah, you could probably load. Actually, I don't know if you could just load half darts in the Moab shells. I'm not sure if they're tight the whole way down. No. I don't know if you're not going to be able to see this, but there's actually a ring about that far down into the shell, and that's the only thing that's actually tight around the dart. The rest of it, there's a half dart in here, and it's just wobbling loose. It's like a I cannot think of the inline clip. It's basically an inline clip. So you might end up only firing one of the darts from each cylinder, which would mean you wouldn't have to reload them all, but it wouldn't do you a whole lot of good. The T-Trek. Thanks for stopping by. Carrying on the... How did that get in here? Alright, what else do we have in here that isn't something super standard? Apparently I've got some N1 darts in here somehow. Who knows how long they've been here? When did I fire Vortex? Not as much rival in here as I would have expected. I define optimization. I mean, honestly, one blaster is the ideal because you don't have to do the work of integrating. Integrating is not optimal. It's time consuming and inefficient. But I mean, there's plenty of really good examples of two blasters being integrated together. I've also seen absolutely gorgeous builds that had a dozen. If you really want to be efficient about it, you want to be optimal, I wouldn't go past 3 because that's just, again, inefficient and wasteful. But if you can find a way to get your hands on an FDL3, do it. There is a reason that even after 6 years, it is still my primary HVZ blaster. And that is because I still haven't found something better. I haven't found a blaster that is as reliable, that performs as well, that is as universally accepted. I spent a lot of money on some fancy blasters, hoping I could find something better than my FDL3. Because it's been... I kind of want to switch to something that fires half darts. Just so because you can carry more ammunition. And it would also mean that I would only have 2 ammo types in my primary loadout, instead of half darts, full darts, and rival. If I could get it to just half darts and full darts, well, okay, that's, again, more efficient. It's fewer ammo types I have to worry about, fewer magazines I have to worry about. But I've had more jams. The SPF is lovely, but it's built for higher FPS. When I went down to low power on it, I kept getting jams. I kept getting blasters getting stuck in the B car. I had more jams with it the one time I ran it than I've had in my FDL3 since I've owned my FDL3. I also spent an inordinate amount of money on the Stinger, hoping that it would be a potential to replace it. And that thing, I haven't been able to put more than 4 mags through it before it has a catastrophic failure. So, I'm a bit salty about how much I spent on that blaster only to have it turn into a doorstop. I really, I've heard if you get the metal wheels it solves a lot of the problems, but I don't want to keep throwing money at a blaster that I doubt is ever going to be better for my purposes than the FDL3. So I am tempted to just convert my FDL3 to half darts. It's a modular system. I could do that. All I would need would be a mag adapter and a customized pusher, or possibly customize the pusher to work with a custom mag adapter that has like a magnet on it, so it would push or lock in some way, so that I can just swap. My FTL3 already takes the 40 round mags, the big Dominator mags. And I've got the adapter for that, and so what I'm really tempted to do is to custom design a monolithic mag adapter that goes from the 40 round magwell down to a half dart magwell. I didn't think this ahead. I don't have anywhere to put these darts. All right, what do we got? What's going on? So the big one that the FDL3 has that like the Venom doesn't is it's brushless, which is very, very nice. So it's relatively quiet, especially on lower FPSs. It doesn't scream. It also has a faster spin-up speed because it's brushless. And it has fully adjustable FPS, which is nice. It'll go anywhere from, sub 100 to like 180, I think is what mine caps out at. If you have one of the select fire ones, well, then it has all of the select fire features, burst and full auto and all of that. Mine is semi-automatic because, well, it's semi-automatic because I didn't check the box to say, give me the fully automatic one, the select fire one, which is what I actually, at the time, had wanted. I'm now very glad that I didn't check that box because the semi-automatic one is a mechanical pusher, and that is fewer things to go wrong. When you got the full computer on board and you've got all those settings and things to tweak, that's just more things to fail. And for HVZ, the number one concern I have in HVZ is reliability. I need to be absolutely certain that when I pull the trigger, a dart will come out. And I don't need it to be full auto because I've got the Jupiter sidecar, which is the feeds from a tank. That's 800 rounds of full auto. That's for when a horde comes around a corner and you just need to spit foam and pray. But I like the semi-auto of the FDO3. I like how incredibly accurate it is with full-length darts. I have hit people that were absolutely sure they were out of range and never even heard the blaster fire because, again, it's brushless and it's quiet. And I was able to just zip and tag them, and they're looking around and no idea who hit them. And it pleases me greatly. Upgrading a CETA. Doesn't the CETA take Retaliator parts? So I think so. Get some nice Retaliator parts, Retaliator spring. I know there were upgrade kits for it. I do have the full auto half dart FDL3. So I do have the select fire one. That's the one I bought in Denmark and smuggled home. And people have run it, and they've loved it. People have run it in comp, people have run it in HVZ. It is a solid blaster. But I've made some modifications to my my semi-automatic one that I haven't made to it. It doesn't have the rail necessary to mount my Jupiter. It doesn't have the under rail under the barrel, and it doesn't have the side rail that is necessary to mount my Jupiter on it. So that is why I haven't just switched to... How did a Vowberry get in here? You wretch. Pardon me while I empty the bins. Where did all this elite come from? I don't think it came from the elite bin. It's full. Now I need another bucket. Alright, what's going on? The best alternative. I don't know. That is a hard question to answer because, as I said, there just isn't anything that, in my opinion, there are plenty of decent blasters out there, of course. And it all comes down to what you're looking for. If you're looking for the select fire, you're probably looking at an SBF. I'll be honest, I have not been keeping up with the high-end market as well as I should. If you can get a stinger working. Apparently, they're fabulous. I know Xfox has gotten his working and has been running it at events, and he seems to like it. I don't know what the issue is with mine, and I don't know how to troubleshoot it. I don't know if it is a hardware issue, if it is a software issue, if it is an issue with imbalanced wheels, if it is an issue with poorly written code, if it's a bad motor. When did I fire 50 cal? All right, now we're getting into half darts. What do we got? Yeah, Hasbro, I don't know. I cannot only imagine what's going on at Hasbro. Why they've made so many of the choices that they've made that just don't seem to make any sense. Though a big thing that I constantly remind people is we are not their main business. We are, if anything, the opposite of their main source of business. We are a problem for them because they are a toy company. They want their items, their products to be safe for kids, to be family friendly, and we go to a lot of trouble to make their stuff a lot more dangerous, and that's just not the market that they're targeting. Now, what's weird is that they've dipped a toe into our side of the hobby a couple of times, and did surprisingly well, given that it was their kind of their first attempt. The Strife X, I don't care what anyone says, the Strife X was a solid stock blaster. It was usable out of the box in comp. It was, there were some tweaks that you could make to make it that made it even better, but it came with its own battery that was USB-C rechargeable, which is universal and awesome. It took Talon magazines, which absolutely baffled me that they made that decision, but then they didn't follow that up. I don't know if the sales just weren't good enough because there just aren't enough of us to justify that, if their attempts to, try to foster, Nerf ball or whatever it was, their competitive style, again, also didn't seem to kick off because, you got to compete with the airsoft and the paintball worlds to get into that competitive toy thing. It didn't have all the features that we want for our level of comp, but it was a good blaster. It was designed by people in the hobby that knew what needed to be done, and they got it done, and then they just didn't follow up. Now, I would have loved to have seen a Rapid Strike X, a long shot X, a Retaliator X, an Alpha Trooper X. Redo all of their most popular and most modded blasters with comp level internals. That would have been fantastic. But I don't know if they had the market for it. Again, that's not what they're about. So they also, I think, suffered from the fact that they were very, I don't know if complacent is the right word, but they were used to it being them and nobody else. For the longest time, the Nerf's slogan was "It's Nerf or nothing," and that was simply true. There was no major competitors, and then Busby came along and But Busby was cheap and it was underpowered, and we made fun of it for them. They didn't even have to. But then Worker came along, and Dart Zone came along, and at first, when X-Shot first came out, they were the cheap stuff. They were the really inexpensive blasters that broke and were underpowered. And then they came out with their Pro line, and again, knocked it out of the park. And for far less than Hasbro would ever sell their stuff for. So, I don't know. I don't know if Hasbro is ever going to get over the fact that they've got competition and just deal with it and branch out, or if they're going to, stick with trying to force proprietary ammos down our throat. Because, first they had Ultra, and then they had Hyper, and now they've got N1, and nobody really likes any of it. It's not backwards compatible. I can't use my other brand blasters. I can't use my old blasters. I have to rebuy all my ammo, and rebuy all my magazines, and rebuy all my... And nobody wants to do that. And it's just such a weird... I mean, like if Lego tomorrow changed their bricks so that the bricks they're selling today don't interlock with the bricks they sold last year. It would be insane. To do that, you're absolutely shooting yourself in the foot when you make yourself incompatible with yourself. I will never understand that marketing choice. Beyond, just greed, because they didn't want people to be able to use their stuff. It baffles me. So, I don't know. The problem, I think, is that Nerf is so big, so well known, and they've got so many other IPs because they own the toys for Star Wars, for My Little Ponies, for Transformers, for G.I. Joe, for all of these other things. And so if Nerf doesn't do so well, they can soak that up, as opposed to, Dart Zone made a choice that tanked an entire year's line, they would probably go under, but Hasbro can get away with it. And so they don't have to be as innovative, they don't have to be as forward thinking, and I don't know. I don't know. I actually am slightly excited about the ZWQ S400. And I'm not generally a bullpup guy, but I've gotten so many good bullpups recently. I'm starting to come around on the concept. I had one arrive today. I'm looking forward to doing the review on. And Out of Darts has already let me know that I'm on the list to get one of the S400 for review, because it comes in my colors, so I gotta. Let's see. Oh, this is just the beginning. This was just the darts from my Dartnet. I've got 4 hampers full of darts to sort from the last couple of Nerf events. All right. What do we got? No, I don't think the Nerf hobby is slowing down at all. In fact, I believe it is absolutely accelerating. The fact that we have so many large invitationals now. There used to be one. It used to be End War or nothing. Now we have Maryland Mayhem. We have Ragnar Oktoberfest. We have Mall Madness. We have Survival Fest. We have... we're working on getting one going up here in the Pacific Northwest, finally. And they're all huge. And there are Nerf clubs all over the place. There are small HVZs again. HVZ slowed down a lot. And a lot of that was COVID. And just the changing, the negative slide that's been taking place in America, where people are a lot more nervous about gun-shaped toys on campus, and you can't even begin to blame them, given that we've reached a point that school shootings aren't even newsworthy anymore. They're so common. And again, COVID also had a huge problem. The fastest thing that'll kill an HVZ is the people running it graduate and don't have anyone to replace them. And during COVID, there was an entire, span of pretty much every club's leaders graduated without having anyone to replace them because they couldn't. And so a lot of HVZs died during COVID, which is unfortunate. Alright, now I gotta catch up. I've been blathering. Hobby diving, no. Mattel might also have the rights to My Little Pony, but I know Hasbro has some of them. I think Mattel still has He-Man. Yeah, Hasbro brought a lot of stuff from Mattel. For instance, Nerf. Hasbro bought Nerf from Mattel. Kenner also had Nerf for a little while, and Laramie had Nerf. And then Hasbro bought all of the rights. They also bought Super Soaker at one point. Could you get a blacksmith to make you a spring? Probably. The biggest issue is going to be getting it tempered correctly. That's what determines the characteristics of the spring, is how it is tempered. And I don't know if a blacksmith would be able to do that at the precision you're wanting, but you can always try. You'd also be surprised how many springs are available at like a hardware store. You can always look into it. Have I been in a tabletop role-playing game recently? No. I briefly, I was in a group for a while, but it became a source of stress for me. It wasn't fun anymore, and so I bowed out for mental health reasons. I did briefly get to do a game with Sergeant Deplorable. I had for years I'd been tinkering with a professional party. That was the thing I didn't like about most games that I've played in, is they always kind of turn into murder hobos save the world. And it's always a band of misfit vagabond hooligans who are thrown together in odd circumstances and are still kind of miscreant hooligans. And I wanted to play a professional, a game of professionals. Professional adventurers or professional mercenaries or professional somethings. But that requires enough people that want to play that style of game, and there aren't as many. At one point in the far past, I got to play a game that was all members of the crew playing essentially the crew in a fantasy world, and it was absolutely awesome. We were professionals. We already had the chain of command and organization, and we knew how to do team combat, and it really worked well. But I've been putting together a party of professional zombie hunters, because HVZ. And just, if you wanted to make a cleric that was really good at fighting undead, how would you do that? Or a rogue that was, or a ranger that specialized in hunting undead. And, well, a fighter's a fighter. They can kill anything. And anyway, I put together a four character party that were all built on teamwork feats and on most of them having been professional soldiers at one time or another, and they're in a world where they're 500 years into a zombie apocalypse, and they are professionals at hunting zombies. And I wanted to try to run that just to see, does this party even kind of work? And Lance was kind enough to run a module for me just to give it a chance. And it was a lot of fun. They were very powerful. And the adventure we put them through was very much underpowered for how powerful they were, because the adventure was largely undead, and these guys are all good at fighting undead. If you put them in a situation where there weren't any undead, they might struggle. The ranger particularly, he actually has penalties to killing anything that's alive, which is hilarious. But other than that, I think we ran that like a year ago, and then he got really busy with work, and we haven't had a chance, and I haven't found another DM to try running it again. Let's see. Do I think real steel shift is a good thing or not? Yeah, I was going to say, what do you mean by real steel shift? Well, the thing about the way blasters look is there is a reason real steel weapons are shaped the way that they are. And that is because it works. The way the grips are shaped, the way the body is shaped, the way, magwell placement and all of that, there's a reason for that. And a lot of it's ergonomics and a lot of it's functionality. And it's hard to get away from it. It's hard to make something that does something similar without making it vaguely similar shaped. We could go full sci-fi, and some people have. There are some very sci-fi looking blasters out there where they've gone to a lot of trouble to make it not look real steel. And that's always cool. But then you run into the issue of, well, it doesn't have any tactical rail, and it doesn't fit into holsters, or, this, that, or the other thing. That's one of the other reasons people make their blasters look, roughly the form factor of real weapons, is that means you can use the tactical gear that exists, the holsters, the slings, the mag pouches, and all of that. So it's unfortunately hard to get away with. The good thing is we make them in bright colors, like you said, and that does help, but it doesn't solve all of the problem. It does make it a little bit trickier to have events in public, but we're running into that problem no matter what we do at this point. So Stampman, I have an entire video on how to start a Nerf club. I recommend looking it up. It's I don't know if we call it Nerf club or Nerf event, or on my YouTube channel. I have a whole video on how to do it. The thing about Hasbro is it is the second, or the thing about Nerf is it is the second most popular toy after Lego. Pretty much everybody has at least a Nerf blaster. And they're easily available. They're available in any Walmart, at any Target, any big box store carries Nerf. Amazon, they're not hard to get a hold of. And so the first thing, the biggest hurdle, what will always be the biggest hurdle for pretty much any event, it doesn't matter what kind of event you're running, the biggest hurdle is going to be venue. You have to find the place to run the event. And the nice thing about Nerf is because it has the social stigma of being a toy and safe for kids, they'll usually let you play in a city park. But you do need to ask. Talk to Parks and Rec. Ask, is there any ordinance against, firing dart blasters in the park? Because there might be. There have been cities that do. They have ordinance against any kind of projectile launcher in city parks because sometime in the past somebody brought a blaster and shot a jogger and ruined it for everybody. But that is the first hurdle. Find your location. If you can find a private venue, much, much better. Because you can do so much more in a private venue than you can in a public venue. You also need to determine what kind of club are you wanting to run. Are you wanting a high FPS competitive club? Or are you wanting a public club that allows anybody, including little kids? Because that's going to change things like what kind of a venue you're going to need, what rules you're going to need, what things you need to worry about. So first, those are the first two things. What kind of a club do you want to run, and then where are you going to run it? And after that, it's a matter of advertising. And there's lots of ways to do that. You can do it on Facebook. You could talk to the local. There's probably a local radio station that might be willing to run ads. There's usually some kind of a local newsletter. I mean, even Vader has a newspaper. If I really wanted to get events running here, that would be where I would go. I'd put an announcement there. You can put up signs, and public places. There's usually public bulletin boards. Put up flyers on telephone poles. Word of mouth. Tell people. Talk to the local after-school clubs. Talk to the local youth groups. The trick is to let people know. People will show up. Ideally, if you can provide loaner blasters and print out rule sets and have iPro and all that, that makes it go a lot smoother, but that isn't necessary. You can say you got to bring your own stuff. Borst, we've been running long enough that I have a whole trailer of loaner blasters and loaner darts and loaner iPro and cover and all of that. But all of that isn't necessary. The thing that is necessary is a venue. So start with the venue and go from there. And then I go over more of the details in the video, so go watch my video. With the Pro line of X-Shot and Dart Zone are going, do you think we'll see any air blasters? I would honestly be kind of surprised if we did see air blasters out of either of those companies, because I don't think we've ever seen them before. The last compressed air blaster that wasn't Hasbro that I can think of, and this I just might not know about it. Busby had some back in the day. They had things like the Berserker had an air tank, and the Panther had an air tank, and I don't even know who made the XBZ, but the XBZ was air tank. And Hasbro hadn't made any for a very long time, presumably because of the lawsuit with Lonnie Johnson, the man who invented them. He invented the Super Soaker and the Supermax line. All of that was built on his patent, and Hasbro was not honoring his patent, and so he sued and eventually won. But I assume that whilst he was in the process of suing them to get what they owed him, they weren't able to make any air blasters. We then did see a few. We saw a barrel attachment that had compressed air in the Modulus line, and then we saw the Blitzfire had compressed air. And I was really hoping that that was gonna come back in force, and we would finally get Demolisher rocket launchers that were compressed air instead of HAMP, because we've had nothing but HAMPs. The only really good blaster that could fire Demolisher rockets was the XBZ, and they are long since extinct. And so, just hoping that they'd bring back the Demolisher Rocket 3 packs and Demolisher Rockets and have bazookas that were built on that. And I wonder if they're not shying away from it because they know what we will do with it. They've gotten wise to our wily tendency to make air blasters fire darts, and they'd just rather not deal with it. And again, it's understandable. I cannot imagine how many lawsuits Hasbro gets every year from people that got hurt by Nerf blasters. I'm sure they have a massive legal department that deals with that, and they probably are constantly settling out of court. And I wouldn't be surprised if the legal department at Hasbro has a huge impact on a lot of design choices and business choices. I know they don't like me because my whole channel is about modifying Nerf blasters, and because my minigun is better than their minigun, and I'm not even mad about that. She's like, no, that's fair, that is true. So who knows? Yeah, I have a huge variety of darts. Somewhere around here I have kind of a display of all of the different darts that I have. And I think I long since ran out of room and stopped I've got a whole bin of variety of different darts that are now, I think most of them are deprecated at this point. They're not even used anymore. Yes, Mall Madness is any of the big HVZs are a lot. Mall Madness is more than just a lot. It is the hardcore version of HVZ. Most HVZs aren't 100% super zombies. They also don't usually have any leveling for humans. So Mall Madness is a weird cross between the Nerf hobby and full-blown LARP. It's not quite Afterworld's level full-blown LARP. It's a really sporterized version of LARP, and I dig it. I mean, it's something that, yeah, you can level up on the fly by yourself. You don't have to go to, fill out forms and do math and all of that. I don't want to say dummied down. They simplified the rule set for that just brilliantly. And when I finally get to run my own events, I plan to copy it at least a little. Not probably quite as hardcore as they do, but I will take a lot of inspiration from how Mall Madness does it. Most HVZs are a lot less than that, but they're usually also on a larger scale. The big HVZs like, Survival Fest and Maryland Mayhem previously took place on college campuses and were huge. You'd march for miles on missions, and gameplay was constantly going on. But yeah, there used to be 700 Nerf clubs, or HVZ clubs, in the United States. And they all went, there was a website that everybody used, and it did some really cool stuff. It tracked, which zombies tagged which humans and would create a growth tree of how the infection spread. And it had all your registration, and it had all of the basic rules, but you could make your own changes to the rules. And unfortunately, it all, slowly fell apart as people came and went from the hobby. Yeah, if I had, gone down the path and become, YouTube millionaire, I'd have bought a lot of property and built some amazing Nerf arena type stuff somewhere between, somewhere up here in the Pacific Northwest. Yeah, and had, wilderness and bunkers and tunnels and buildings and small cities and run some really, really awesome events. But I wasn't prepared to do what one has to do to get that kind of famous, and so it didn't. Now I make like $200 a month on YouTube, and it just goes into running the local smaller events, which is fun. Yeah, actually, can you not see it? Urgh. Yes, I am a fan of 40K. Behold, my bolter, my bolt pistol. I've got that one, and I've also got a less accurate, like screen accurate looking one, but another bolter. I've never played 40K. I have no interest in playing 40K, but I love the lore. I listen to a number of YouTube lore channels about 40K. I've been building any mocks recently? Not. Yes, I did do a little bit of Blacktron. I built a Gen 1 version of the what is that one called? I don't remember the name of it now, but in Gen 2 Blacktron there was the ship with the big canopy in the middle and the two pods on either side. I made a Gen 1 version of that. That could take any of the cockpits from all the other module Blacktron ships that I've built. And then the center pod with the canopy, it doesn't have a clear canopy, it's got the canopy with the Blacktron symbol on it, the the Sierpinski Triangle, the Triforce. The wing sections pop off of it, and then it is a module that fits in the new Blacktron ship that came out recently. I was really proud of how all that came out. The other Lego that I've done recently is I finally got my hands on the UCS A-Wing from Star Wars. I had an X-Wing that I got when Dr. Flux traded me his collection, and I had a B-Wing, or a Y-Wing, that I'd gotten kind of by accident. I was trying to order one of the minifig scale ones, and the guy on eBay didn't know the difference and sent me the UCS one, which I wasn't going to tell him he'd sold me a $350 set for $35. He didn't need to know that. He was happy not knowing that. And then I recently traded a bunch of stuff to my local Lego shop, Bricks and Wheels, and got the A-Wing. And then it was missing a couple of parts, but it was like $20 in parts, so I ordered them from Bricklink, and they're on the way. And then I decided to see how much of the UCS B-Wing I already had the parts for. I knew I didn't have the set, because there were a couple of unique parts that if I'd had the set, it would be really obvious because I'd have those parts. But it came out in like 2014, which is long enough ago that there weren't as many weird parts back then. And my collection is generally fairly old. I don't have a lot of the new fancy fangled parts yet. But I decided to see, if I'm going to go through my bins, and I'll pull up the parts list on Bricklink and see how much of it I had. Turns out I had 91% of it, which is pretty good. I was only missing 130 parts. And a lot of those weren't that I didn't have any of the part, I just didn't have enough of them. So there's one that there's 36 of them in the set, and I had 6. And there was another one that had 36 parts that I had 8. So that accounted for a lot of it. And I was able to get all the parts that I need, minus a few really expensive parts that I chose to substitute out, for about $50. So for $50, I got another $350 UCS set, and then I'll have the whole set: the A-Wing, the B-Wing, the X-Wing, and the Y-Wing, and it'll look lovely on display. Wasn't expecting them to not all be the same scale. I was really kind of hoping that they would all be, the same scale, like 1 to 23 or 1 to 17 or whatever. And they're not. They are very different scales. The A-Wing is much bigger than it should be comparatively. But I think the reason they did that is, and then the B-Wing is much smaller than it should be. The B-Wing is a big fighter. The X-Wing and the Y-Wing are about the same scale, but then the A-Wing is too big and the B-Wing is too small. But what I think the reason they did that is they're all about the same size. So they take up the same amount of space on a shelf. So if you had, a display where it was a whole bunch of boxes that were all the same size and you were displaying your fancy Star Wars sets in them, each of the UCS ships would fill about the same amount of space. That's my theory. It could just be arbitrary. I don't know. HPA blasters. So I have never quite gotten into HPA. What I've built, I think the closest thing I've got is what still qualifies as LPA. And that's something where it's just got a tank that you fill up and you fire it and it empties the whole tank. And then you have to repump it up. And you can, even if it's motorized and even if it's going up to, 100 and some odd PSI, it's still one shot per fill. HPA typically refers to something that's got like a paintball tank, where it's got a huge amount of compressed air in a tank, and you get many, many shots out of it before it actually runs out of pressure and you have to reload it. I have not gotten into that. I've dabbled. I knew somebody who was into that, and I was hoping to eventually learn the secrets of HPA from them, but then COVID happened and it never ended up happening. There's any number of blasters I would love to build that would do that. Somebody built an HPA sledge fire, and I think that's a fabulous design. Other people build things like HPA mag strikes and other compressed air blasters, where if you have an inordinate amount of compressed air, they can become really, really cool. The biggest concern with our community when it comes to HPA is that in a lot of places, a lot of cities, a lot of counties, a lot of states, because you can actually have HPA real steel weapons, you can hunt deer with HPA rifles. They were using HPA in wars in the past. They're regulated. They're regulated like firearms, and so they're just not allowed. And a lot of clubs, because the people responsible for the event, the people running the event who are responsible for everybody's safety, because they don't know enough about HPA to determine whether what you've brought is safe or not, they rightfully don't allow it. Because if they can't guarantee that it's safe, then they shouldn't allow it. Because if something goes bad and people get hurt, it's on them because it's their event. And even if they just might not like it, that's also perfectly legitimate. It's their event, their house, their rules. Other places have no problem with it. The people running the game know it well enough, or the people who are doing it have taught them enough and have demonstrated and proved to them that this is safe. And that's really what it comes down to. It comes down to education and willingness to accept the responsibility and the liability. But I haven't gotten into it. Like I said, there's lots of things that I would love. I'd love a semi-automatic Titan launcher. Make something that's, harmonica slide of Titan rockets. I can just boom, boom, boom. Love it. I would love it. But I don't have it. But I have seen, like, semi-automatic Fortnite grenade launchers, semi-automatic Centurion, semi-automatic Roto Fury. These things exist, and they're amazing. But I haven't gotten into it, so I can't help you. No, Ben Judy was saying that because my minigun is better than their minigun, shots fired. No, that is actually confirmed. That's not an assumption on my part. That comes from an ex-Hasbro engineer who was working at Hasbro at the time and confirmed that, yeah, they were all salty about Tyr because Tyr came out several years before the Titan came out. But Hasbro's R&D cycle is so long, they had already started developing the Titan at that point. And it should have been the biggest, baddest, coolest, most amazing Nerf blaster to ever exist. It was this big rotating barrel minigun with a 50-round drum, and it was awesome. It should have been the most epic thing ever. But Tyr had gone completely viral when it came out. And they knew that we're going to release this blaster with its 50-round drum and its 5 darts a second, and it's not having a rocket launcher, and only thing anyone is going to say about it is, well, Captain Xavier has a better minigun. And they're right. That is what happened. And they're completely understandably annoyed about it because, I just yanked the rug right out from under them. And you might even be able to say that because of things like that, they quit bothering to try to make big, bad, awesome blasters. Because they were never going to be able to top the kind of lunacy that we're coming out with in the hobby, that I come out with. They come out with the Prometheus, and it's amazing. And then I make one that holds 800 rounds and has the barrel. They come out with, a Nemesis, and we put God Hoppers on it. They're never going to be able to compete with something like a Proton Pack. Or the Infinite Pack with a Jupiter, or anything like that. So why bother? I doubt that's really the case, but one could go down that path. But yeah, no. The engineers at Hasbro apparently all loved my channel and watched my channel and wished they could design things like I designed, but they knew they couldn't. And the marketing department and the legal department despised me because I was a walking litigation nightmare. And just a PR nightmare because they're always getting asked, why don't you make stuff as cool as Captain Xavier? Captain Xavier made this amazing blaster. Why don't you? Well, they can't. I'm not fettered by the rules of the toy industry, whereas they are. Favorite barrel material for pusher breech springers? Aluminum? I think aluminum. It's smooth and lightweight and inexpensive. I think I've seen a super spamf, and I think I've held a super spamf, and I think I saw somebody break a super spamf. But all I have is a regular spamf that just showed up one day. That was the weirdest thing. For the longest time, Gavin Fuzzy didn't even warn me that he was sending me stuff. He didn't ask if I wanted to review stuff. He didn't inform me that, just stuff just showed up in the mail from Gavin Fuzzy. That one was hilarious because the day it arrived, I had seen Wallcom's review and was like, that's actually really cool. I'd like to get one of those. And then I went to my P.O. box and there was one there. It's like, who's watching me? It's weird. Well, I don't know if they built me a bolter, but yes, Mitch Essinger built a 2-scale bolter. The thing about, the bolters I have is they're to scale with a human, whereas actual bolters were built for 8-foot superhumans. And so he built one to the correct scale, the correct dimensions. And bolters fire a 75 caliber round, which happens to be what Mega is. Mega is 3/4 of an inch, 75 caliber. Apparently, it was a lot of fun. Yeah, yes, Hasbro could make a proton pack. It's really not that complicated. If you look at the ones that I've got that were built on the old technology, it's one motor that moves the agitator and an air mattress fan. That's the proton pack. That's really all there is to it. And then it goes to a flywheel blaster. And Hasbro has those. In fact, Tyr just has a Hurricane or a Zeus cage in it. It's built using a Nerf blaster. Same with the Smart Gun. The Smart Gun, the internal, it's got a section of it that is a Nerf blaster. They could, but it would cost so much money. The amount of ammo that it would take would cost more than any Nerf blaster they've ever actually sold. And while it's not physically complicated, the maintenance of it can be finicky, and I don't know that they'd ever want to do that. Ooh, a half-dart Stampede with a stainless steel barrel. That's gotta be sexy. Yeah, that is what Killer Zed was. Yeah, Hasbro stopped innovating. I remember the N-Strike days, the N-Strike Elite days. There was, and actually, if you look at the much older stuff, things like the Mag Strike and similar old HPA, LPA blasters, air-powered blasters. They made a fully automatic blaster that was air-powered and had an obscene rate of fire. It was the coolest thing. They had, the Titan, the Unity power system was multiple blasters that all locked together and shared power. The Lightning Blitz being an air-powered shotgun. The Squirt Gun Nerf Blaster combo blasters. They came out with things like Vortex was an interesting ammo because it worked differently. It did things darts didn't do. It ricocheted, it hovered, They came out with Mega, which was a big dart that, while it didn't do anything really different than a regular Nerf blaster, it was distinct enough that we could use it in different ways in games. The same thing with Mega XL and with Demolisher rockets. those were all innovative ammunition types. You get into Ultra and Hyper and N1, there's nothing innovative about them. They don't do anything. They don't allow for any gameplay really that's different. They're not big enough, or they're they came out. They came out with the AccuStrike darts. They were still the most accurate darts anyone came up with, and then they made AccuStrike half darts, and they were better than anyone else's darts. And then they just didn't follow through. I could go on about that all day. Yeah, kind of. The Caliburn started it all, really. That was the first major fully 3D printed, or mostly 3D printed and hardware blaster that I'm aware of. But we've gotten a lot better at designing blasters. We can make a smaller blaster that has a lighter prime and more power than a Caliburn, which is just insane to me. The fact that they've gotten, Lynxes that are hitting 300 FPS that you can prime with your pinky. I don't understand the physics and the engineering behind that. I don't know about obsolete. They still work. But there are smaller options. There are easier options. There are stealther options. But they by no means don't work. Especially if you're not going into the stupid high ranges. If you're content being around, 200 FPS, Caliburn's perfectly fine. And I love mine. I've got one of the early ones, and it has a place of honor on my shelf. Blaster Boy, hello! I do love Stampedes. No, see, I wouldn't paint... if I had enough Titan drums, I would probably paint one yellow just to have a yellow one. But obviously, I want an orange one, an orange and black one, to go with Tyr, or Ire, because Ire was supposed to have a 50-round drum, and didn't, and now can. I just haven't painted one. I should acquire one just to paint it. And I need to finish Ire's upgrades. It's only been a couple of years. What are my excuses? I do love that AEBs are making a comeback. That there are so many really good ones. The piston pump being from a big brand company, coming from X-Shot. That is light at the end of the tunnel. All right, let's see Workers AEB. Let's see Dart Zones AEB. I'd be happy with Hasbro trying it again. Because they're so very satisfying, and the technology has gotten to the point that they work. The nice thing about a half darts is you don't have to prime the blaster as far. But then it's a matter of, okay, well, how do we get it to prime enough to have enough power? Well, again, we've figured out how to make plunger tubes so much more efficient and barrels so much better that we're getting more energy out of less, spring loads and smaller plunger tubes, and it's allowing us to do things we couldn't do before, which is just, hey, I'm wearing your shirt. Behold. Do I have a Vector Pro? I don't think so. I'm not even sure what a Vector Pro is. What's a Vector Pro? Ow! Nerd! Fancy meeting you here. Alright, I am going to get all of this sorted into their bins and then start in on the big mess. I was surprised I didn't have more Arrival in there. talk amongst yourselves for a minute. Oh, yeah, the dart zone. Like I said, weirdly, I've never been a fan of bullpups, but it has nothing to do with anything logical. It's just most real steel bullpups are not left-hand friendly. Whereas Nerf ones, that's not really an issue. But my disdain remains. I missed the bin. Making a mess. I need to do some winter cleaning around here. This place is getting absolutely messy. Where did those come from? Couple of the glow-in-the-dark half-darts. Those are cool. Wish I had another 10,000 of them. Whoops. Threw you in the wrong bin. Now for the main event. Clear the detritus out. I have 3 totes of this size. The other 2 are actually more full than this one. A ball pit ball. All right. Let's see what's going on. Question, Mr. Dr. Professor Captain, when he comes back. Do you have much experience with boffer fighting outside of Afterworlds? So, when I was a senior in high school, when I was 18, I got signed up for a medieval recreation group called the Empire of Adria. And the earliest... The lightest form of combat they had was boffer combat, and that was just for training. They didn't actually use it at any events, but that was what you trained with until you were good enough. They finally would give you a bamboo sword and a fencing mask, and then properly beat the piss out of you. And that pretty much consumed my life for the next little over 10 years. I very quickly got into the Shanai, and then I got into rapier, and then I got into steel. So yes, I have 24 years of boffer combat experience, and I had most of that before I got to Afterworlds. The thing that kind of amazed me about Afterworlds, or what I liked about Afterworlds, is that despite it having, levels and special abilities, most of the boffer combat still came down to how good are you with a boffer. I'd played in some other systems where real skill didn't matter. I mean, it was more like playing Dungeons and Dragons than LARPing. The actual sword combat meant practically nothing. Nobody actually had any actual fighting ability, and it didn't matter because you basically used your character's abilities to determine whether or not you hit. It had nothing to do with whether you actually hit. And I didn't like that. I preferred my skill to matter. So I like Afterworlds more. Like I said, it was only for initial training, and eventually we got to a point where we didn't actually use boffers anymore. The group that I joined, when I joined, was still new enough. They didn't have any loner equipment. They didn't have loner helmets. They didn't have loner swords. And so boffer was the easiest way for people to be able to start to learn. And I think they might still use it in some places at some level. I haven't been involved in the Empire of Adria for quite a while. As for the Discord, yes. So, years ago, I launched an organization called the Auxiliary, or simply known as the Auxiliary. It was technically the Crew Auxiliary. And there were reasons, but yes, I eventually did step down, and it transitioned from being the Crew to the Federation of United Nerfers, of which I am no longer really affiliated with directly. I still think it's a wonderful thing. I still think they do wonderful stuff for the hobby. When I first got into the hobby, the online part of the hobby was a toxic cesspool. It was not really a pleasant place to try to get into the hobby because it was full of elitism and gatekeeping, and I'm sure there's still plenty of that around. But it was really bad. Like, people would leave the hobby entirely when they stepped one toe into the online community because people were just horrid to new people. And the auxiliary was opposed to that. Our motto was more fun for everyone, and we encouraged people to be helpful to new people, to be kind to new people, to make the hobby inviting for new people, and it was, I believe, very successful. And much of the online spaces, or at least the online spaces that I continued to be a part of, are much, much nicer. There's a fair number of chill old men like myself that take part and help new people get into it and answer questions and give advice instead of just being trolls about it. Yeah, the patches have vanished. Where did you find a pin? Who sells the pin? I don't know there even were auxiliary pins anymore. Foam Blast used to sell the pins. Did they sell their stock to someone else and someone's out there selling pins? Because I'd love to get a pin. I don't think anyone's selling patches anymore. I don't know that anyone officially ever sold a patch. I would sell patches when I traveled. To help pay for travel. I made 3D printed ones. And I now have a much nicer printer. I can actually dual extrude. I could make a really nice patches now if I wanted to. My go-to race in D&D was always Dwarf. And my go-to class was Cleric. I played generations of Dwarven Clerics, where each Dwarven Cleric I played, each new Dwarven Cleric I played, was the son of a previous Dwarven Cleric that I had played. At one point I got to play in a prehistoric campaign, where we were cave dwarves and cave people and cave elves. And so I got to play the first Dwarven Cleric in the bloodline of Dwarven Clerics that I had been playing for 20 years. And every once in a while that would actually have an effect in the game. Usually there aren't a whole lot of things where it really matters, that your character knows who their parents are. But in 3.5, there was a form of magic that you could dabble in where the more your character knew about themselves, the more powerful the spells they could cast on themselves. And so the fact that I could say, not only do I know who my dwarf's father is, I have his character sheet right here, was fun. In one campaign, I was playing the son of one of my Dwarven Clerics, and another character decided to play the daughter of said Dwarven Cleric. So we were playing brother and sister, and it was a really fun dynamic because we bickered like siblings. Because I had become a cleric like Dad, and that made Dad happy, where she had become a fighter, and Dad didn't like that, but Mom did, so Dad liked me, Mom liked her. was fun. Yes, eventually I will do a video on finishing Ayer's upgrades whenever I actually finish Ayer's upgrades. I am also planning to do some very significant upgrades to Tyr. Because Tyr had... I had wanted Tyr to be my first brushless blaster, but I just wasn't ready to take the leap into brushless when I built it. But now I know how to do it, and I have contacts with people who know how to do it much better than I do. And so I want to do some serious upgrades to the internals, and really get some power and more versatility. And I'll admit, some of that is just so that Tyr can compete with the Moab on rate of fire. I don't think I'll ever get Tyr to the point of firing 50 rounds a second, because a proton pack won't feed that fast. At least none of mine will feed that fast. But I would like to get Tyr to the point of being able to fire as fast as a proton pack can feed, which is typically around 30 to 40 rounds a second, which is still insane. But to keep up with that rate of fire, I need to go brushless, and I need to go powerful brushless. Favorite proton black blast beside Tyr? Smart gun. I mean, my smart gun's my favorite above Tyr. The only thing the smart gun doesn't have is a rocket launcher. Yet. I have been meaning to design a rail-attached rocket launcher system, and I already have the extra buttons built into the smart gun to where I could plug in said system and be able to fire rockets the way Tyr does. Alright, I think I got most of the full lengths. Let's start on the rival. There were at least 2 proton packs at this last mall battle. Sergeant Deplorable was running his new one that I helped build. We need to upgrade his blaster that he attaches to it. Build a custom one to go with the custom rig. Because we made it look... Well, he built the same thing that I have, where it's a gas tank, or looks like a gas tank. It's actually a water jug, but it's made to look like a jerry can. But then he actually strapped it to an actual surplus World War II backpack frame. And the tank he got was OD green, so it matches beautifully with all the rest of the OD green. And we made a blaster that vaguely looks like a World War II flamethrower. We need to take it that extra step and make it look more like a flamethrower. We basically just stuck a rod out the back of a Jupiter, put an extra hand grip on it, and called it a flamethrower. We can do better. The files exist for a 3D printed flamethrower. We just need to make it fire rival. Yeah, that was one of the reasons that the auxiliary's logo is what it is that it's easy. It's easy to make. That was one of the concerns we had when we came up with the cruise logo, was, you know, a badge, something that you're going to put on your shield, on your gear, on your flag, on your it needs to be easy to make and easy to identify at a distance. The hourglass came from Emmanuel Wayne's pirate flag. He was a French privateer, which was what my character, Captain Xavier, originally was a French privateer. And his logo was the skull with the crossed bones behind the skull and an hourglass below it. And so that was our full flag, but our device was just the hourglass because it was just easier to put. So that's what we painted on all of our shields. That's what we painted on our banners, on all of our gear, all of our equipment. And when we started doing stuff that wasn't medieval recreation, we put it on our patches, we put it on our blasters, we put it on, anywhere that you wanted to have your logo, we put the hourglass, a white hourglass on a black background. When the auxiliary became a thing, because there'd always been crew auxiliary, even back in our medieval recreation days, we were mercenaries, we would occasionally end up with auxiliaries, but they just got given our equipment. When the auxiliary became this big public thing for a little while, it needed its own logo, and we chose to simply invert the triangles of the hourglass and create what is referred to as the anti-glass. Similarly, we took the original Emmanuel Wayne flag, and instead of bones behind the skull, it was white out long shots, and then instead of the hourglass, it was the anti-glass. So, while the auxiliary is not the big public event that it was, it does still exist because I do still travel to events, and sometimes when I travel to events, I decide, you know what, I would like to have a squad to lead. I like working with professionals, I like being organized, I want to actually try to do this, and I usually can't scrounge up enough crew anymore that can attend the big events, and so I call on auxiliary. I call on, volunteers. Who wants to be in my squad? But I took a break from that for a couple of years to deal with some issues and to let some things die down. There were issues, mistakes were made, choices were made. Why are there always more half-darts than I started with? I swear there's more in here than when I started sorting. So yes, the local club, the Pacific Northwest Nerf Club, will be hosting numerous wars. We we attempted to cut back on the number of wars that we were going to host this year in order to allow other people to host their own events, and people did, but they didn't have the infrastructure or the experience to run them themselves, so we ended up running them for them at first. So that's how we ended up with more events up in a mall in Everett, and then we ended up with events at the mall down in Portland. The Everett one has pretty much become self-sustaining at this point, which is really cool. He's made a business out of it. It's really neat. And they continue to host those events up there. I don't think... Well, there's no plans, as far as I know, for the Portland group to become self-sufficient. It pretty much seems like we're just using their venue to run events. And that means that we're not getting the time off we had wanted to get by hosting fewer events. The plan was other people would host events, and our mod team would get to play at events instead of running every event all summer. And we ended up running every event all summer anyway. The nice thing about the Everett events at this point is, yeah, they do run themselves, which means I can just go and I can play. I don't have to be in charge of anything, and I can bring my ridiculous blasters and just go to town, and it's nice. We are hoping to run an invitational eventually, a big one. Mall Madness scale, rag scale, 200-300 people in size, somewhere here in the Pacific Northwest. Biggest issue, of course, is venue. We don't currently truly have a venue big enough. We are looking at options. And we're hoping to run a trial game, a much smaller game, a limited game, early next year, if we can find a venue. So, Tyr versus Moab. I am going to do that video. And yeah, I don't think the results are really going to surprise anybody. Really, the only advantage the Moab has is rate of fire. And the disadvantages stack up quick. For one, yes, Tyr, in current configuration, Tyr holds 4 times as much ammo. Tyr holds 2,000 rounds. But still isn't really practical for an HVZ because it's big and bulky. There's a reason that I've never brought Tyr to an HVZ as a player. I did once as an NPC, and that was fun and all. But there's a reason that I run the loadout that I do, the FDL3 with the Jupiter on the side. It only holds 800 rounds. I say only 800 rounds, as if that's not an absurd amount of ammo capacity. But it's much lighter, it's much more compact, it's much more convenient, mobile. The big minigun is slow, it's cumbersome, it's awkward. Yeah, it does have a rocket launcher built into it, but I could just strap a Proud Papa to the side of my FDL3 and have super breakers. And I really should have. I didn't at Survival Fest, and I ended up dying because the Mega XL blaster that I did use had not been properly maintained, and that is 100% on me. And I got tagged in Mission 1. So... You know, I did do the slightly unfair reviews minigun edition, and yeah, I compared the Titan to Tyr, and yeah, Tyr, it wasn't a fair review because Tyr is just on a completely different scale than the Nerf Titan. Projects I would like to give another go. Well, as I already mentioned, I do want to finish Ayer's upgrade. That was one I never quite finished. I do have some big proton backpack style blasters that I'd like to build that I just haven't gotten around to. I really need to get around to building that pulse rifle because the designer was at Mall Madness with his pulse rifle. And I have run out of excuses. I have no excuse. There is no excuse. I mean, my explanation is that I paid for that blaster. It wasn't sent to me for review. If he'd sent it to me for review, I absolutely would have gotten it built and gotten the review out, because otherwise I would have reneged on my promise. But I bought that thing. But I still want to build it, because I got to see, again, just how incredibly cool it is. Alright. Back in the hamper with you. Do I have a shovel? Might have a bucket. The Venom is very popular at HVZs. It is a solid blaster, and it hits the numbers. Pardon me whilst I deal with all this. Talk amongst yourselves. I need bins. Where are my bins? number 2. Worst malfunction I've had. Of all the blasters that I've used in serious events or semi-serious events, the one that has had the most catastrophic failures, unfortunately, is Tyr. Tyr is complicated and was built the hard way. I didn't understand 3D design. There were a lot of things I would have done very differently if I were building Tyr today, which is one of the reasons I want to do a major upgrade to address a variety of reliability issues that Tyr suffers from on account of how it was originally built. The most common issue that Tyr has had that has been a catastrophic failure, where there is no way for me to deal with it in the field, is the right flywheel keeps popping off the motor post. And I have tried numerous things to prevent this from happening, and they have all worked for a while, only to eventually fail at the most inopportune of times. And as one of the reasons I want to switch Tyr over to a brushless system where the wheel is literally bolted to the motor and cannot fall off at the most inopportune of moments. The smart gun blew its brains out. Originally it ran on an Arduino, and it died at Jared's Epic Nerf Battle in between games, which was unfortunate. I have since switched to a Narfduino, and it hasn't given me any trouble, though I need to do some significant redesigns to how the backpack works with the smart gun. Favorite Lego set from this year? What came out this year? Did the Medieval Village come out this year, or was that last year? When did the D&D set come out? I don't remember. Time is a blur. Last year is still 2019 in my brain. Bullpup AG. Yeah, see, a Bullpup AEG. We are seriously overdue. The one downside is that would mean that the main action would be right by your ear, which would be loud. In my opinion, one of the coolest things about the Moab is the fact that the Moab is actually 6 AEBs in a trench coat. Well, what they would have to do for a Bullpup AEB is what they did with, like, the Lynx. It would have to be flipped around. So the magazine would be in the back, but the plunger would be in the front, but the plunger would go backwards and then the air would come around. At least I assume that's how they would do it. Or you could move the... Well, you could do like what they did with the Soldier 77. And the gearbox is actually in the front of the blaster, rather than in the grip like it is on the piston pump and the BK series. Then it would just be a matter of relocating the grip, because there's nothing in it but a switch. Well, yeah, there are more opportune times. Like, if it were to pop off at the very end of a fight, that wouldn't be so bad. But when it blows the flywheel 10 seconds into the last stand at an HVZ, that is an inopportune time. Like if it blows the flywheel as the last round leaves and you're empty anyway, that would be a perfectly fine time for the flywheel to go. But when you're supposed to be using the blaster in front of, you know, all of Afterworlds at a last stand, and suddenly you have no flywheel, less good. How do you get over uncertainty in freshly built electric blasters? Put a couple mags through it. The thing about catastrophic failures is you cannot prove a negative, which means there is no way to guarantee it won't fail. All you can ever guarantee is that it hasn't failed yet. And there is no way around that. You could put 20,000 darts through it and think, ha, it's perfect, and then it fails on the 20,001 dart. There is no way to be sure. You can only be relatively, you know, like my FDL. Like I said, I've yet to have my FDL fail me in such a way that I was tagged. It's so reliable. But for all I know, the next HVZ I go to, 5 minutes into the first round, it's going to fail and I'm going to get tagged. And there is nothing I can do to guarantee that it won't. That's just the nature of mechanical failure. Basically, you have to go with the Captain Spears philosophy of, as soon as you enter combat, you're already dead. So there's no point in worrying about it. Aha! The child has been returned. There is no need to panic. Correct. The biggest thing that you can have, the best way to not be overly worried about it, is have a backup. And have the backup also be something as reliable as possible. There is also a reason that my FDL3 is semi-automatic for HVZ. As I mentioned earlier in this chat, the simpler the blaster, the fewer things there are to go wrong, the more reliably it inherently is. I don't have a computer on board. I don't have a solenoid on board. I don't have a lot of additional complications and things that could potentially fail. The pusher is linked directly to the trigger. When I pull it, it mechanically forces a dart forward. The only thing I need to worry about is the dart getting caught in the magazine, or the flywheels going bad, or the motor going bad, and that's a lot less to worry about than also having to worry about software and a PCB and, you know, selector switch settings and selector switches and just more things to fail. I do still do fan mail, or I would if I got any. Once upon a time, I got sent so much fan mail, I had to do fan mail videos every single week just to deal with it. Now, I don't remember the last time I got sent anything in fan mail. And I'm okay with that. Do not feel bad for not sending me fan mail. I do not expect fan mail. I do not demand fan mail. I do not feel that I am owed fan mail. My view is if I'm not getting fan mail, it's because I don't deserve fan mail. People do not feel the need or the urge to send me fan mail. I also understand the economy we're in. Sending some random guy on YouTube stuff is expensive. Take care of yourselves first. Take care of your family first. I'm doing fine. I don't need any more stuff. I've run out of room for stuff. Letters are always nice. Letters don't take up space. And I can read letters. And they're much more personal than an email or a comment or anything like that. And it gives me an excuse to do a fan mail video. My thoughts on proprietary magazines. Basically you covered it. If something, it's got to have something that makes it being proprietary worthwhile. But most of them don't. A lot of off-brand companies have made magazines that they're not quite Talon compatible, and that's a problem because Talon is the standard. It's what we have lots of. If you want to have your own magazine, absolutely, it needs to do something very special. It needs to have a really high capacity. It needs to load an ammo that isn't normal. But at that point, it's not so much a proprietary magazine as you just have an entirely proprietary blaster. I actually do have, around here somewhere, an example of that. I have a proprietary magazine. It was sent to me today. I have this. It is a double stack magazine. There has been a catastrophe. One moment. You wretched bin. How very dare you? Yes. Double stack magazine. It holds more darts in the same amount of space than Talons. But it isn't Talon compatible, obviously. You would have to build a blaster specifically to take this magazine. And that is what has been done. And that was what arrived today. And I look forward to doing the review on that. Yeah, it serves enough of a purpose that other people have started designing blasters or redesigning blasters so that they can take that magazine. Because we've tried to do double stack mags in the past and they never quite worked. The Dominator had a double stack mag, and as long as you had like brand new out of the box darts, they would feed. But once they started to get worn, it started having a lot of jamming issues and feeding issues, and it became a hassle. Misplaced Moose figured out how to get it to work. And one of the things that's changed is the nature of the darts. Half darts hold their shape a little better than full-length darts because there's less foam involved. They also have a lot of half darts that are made from denser foam. And so they're able to double stack better. The other thing is that previously what people were trying to get the double stack mag to do was, as it feeds to the top, it would center. And the darts didn't want to play along with that. This one, it doesn't try to center them. It stays one dart on this side, one dart on that side. And then as they're pushed into the barrel has a conical feed lip, essentially, that centers the dart as it loads. And so that solved all the issues, and it's very reliable. It arrived today with magazine that was loaded and while shipping, and not even anything that even resembled a jam when I went through the whole mag. So what's the advantage there? Well, it holds, like I said, far more darts than a Talon mag for the same amount of space, and that means you don't have to reload as often. And in a competitive game, not having to reload as often is huge. Generally, to get the same capacity that this has, you either have to have the massively long Tachi mags, or you'd have to have a drum mag, both of which are awkward and cumbersome because of their shape. This doesn't have that problem. It's roughly the same size as a standard Talon stick mag, but with twice the capacity. So you're reloading half as much, which is great. Yeah, double stack it's not a new conundrum and not a new issue. It's just someone finally figured it out. And I know they've done things like remixed the Proteon so that it can take the double stack mag. Big question that I had, of course, is how difficult would it be to make adapters? Is it wide enough? If you have the catch in the same place as you have it on a Talon mag, then it would just be a matter of having scales, like on my FDL 3. It just has scale plates that go into the magwell and clip in that then bring it from the 40 round down to the 22s, regular. I see no reason you couldn't do the same thing to a blaster designed to take this mag and have it then also be able to take Talon mags. Because the backwards compatibility is important. I like modularity and compatibility. If it can do both, have it do both. And if you can make it easy enough that you can swap in the field, even better. Because then you can start with the big mags if you have a couple of them, and switch to the smaller ones if you already had a bunch of them later. Here, how are we doing? Oh, we found more full-length darts. Alright, what's going on in the chat? The bins! Yes, the bins are rebelling. It tipped over. No, see, that was the whole issue that people were trying to do in the past. Is they wanted to make a double stack mag that was Talon compatible, Talon Magwell compatible. And the problem is darts aren't shells. Um, and so rather than feeding into a single feed chute and becoming single stack, they would just jam. And so efforts to make a double stack to single stack compatible mag stalled. And it might have been solvable. It definitely would work if you were doing a shell ejecting blaster. And I think people have done that. They had no trouble doing double stack shell ejection blasters. And since the shell ejecting blaster is going to take a proprietary mag anyway, there was no reason not to make it double stack. It's not going to be Talon compatible. It takes shells. And so that was easy because the shells would slide on each other the way they do in real steel, where double stack works just fine. It was when you're just firing darts, they didn't like to feed that way because they're squishy. But this alleviates that. So then, yeah, rather than trying to make the magazine backwards compatible, you make the blaster backwards compatible to be able to take both types of mags. You do then have to design the blaster so that it can feed from a double stack double feed, which isn't that difficult on things like flywheelers. It's a little bit more difficult on, might be a little bit more difficult on springers. This original one is a springer and it works just fine, but people have reverse engineered flywheelers to work with the double stack double feed, so yeah. The ability to 3D print your mags, because it does just use drum mag springs, leaf springs, or coil springs, which are better on darts anyway, because it's constant pressure. The pressure on the darts don't get heavier the more you load in. With regular coil springs, compression springs, the more you load, the heavier the spring load gets, and then it starts smashing your darts. Whereas when you use a leaf spring, no, that's not the word. I can't think of the word. The drum mag springs, it's constant. It doesn't matter how much you uncoil, the stress doesn't get any more, which makes them feed evenly and smoothly, and they don't crush your darts as bad. From my understanding, it's fairly important that the darts go into the flywheel consistently. Otherwise, the more inconsistent you feed the darts into the flywheel, the more inconsistent they're going to come out. The key to accuracy in all systems is consistency. So it's true for archery, it's true for firearms, it's true for anything. If you want to be accurate, you have to be able to do the same thing every time so that you get the same results every time. That's why in archery you always draw back to the same spot, whether you anchor on your chin or the side of your mouth or your ear, depending on your draw length or the bow or the style of archery you're doing. You need to be able to do it the same way every single time. If you're anchoring to different places every time, the arrow's going to go somewhere different. So if the dart comes in high, or the dart comes in low, or it comes in from the left, or it comes in from the right, that's going to affect how it comes out. Yeah, I agree. Krakens are the way to go. They're a little bit more expensive, but you're getting value for the price. They've got bearings in them, so they're quieter. They've got more torque, so they can handle a higher rate of fire, especially if you're doing a Vulcan. Yeah, definitely Krakens if you're going something that's full auto. Because the higher torque is what prevents sag. So if you've ever fired a blaster that did not have enough torque on the motors, enough current being drawn by the motors, when you get a high rate of fire going, the FPS starts dropping significantly because the wheels aren't able to get back up to speed fast enough between shots. And that just has to do with conservation of energy. In order to impart energy on the dart and make the blaster go, the energy has to come out of somewhere, and where it's coming out of is the rotational energy of the wheels. And so when the dart goes through, the wheels put energy into the darts, but that means the wheels have to slow down because they've given up some of their energy. And the motors then have to get them back up to speed, and higher torque motors can do that better. So, Krakens are the answer. Not even sure what else there is. Can a stock gearbox handle a 3S? We were talking about a Vulcan? The Vulcan doesn't use a... oh, yeah. The motor can handle a 3S. Yeah, no problem. The Vulcan motor is a 360 motor, as opposed to 130s, which is what most Nerf... That's what a Kraken motor is. That size of motor is a 130. The Vulcan's motor is a 360. It's a big motor, and it will take... I think people have run them on 6S. And all it does is make it go terrifyingly fast. And jam a lot. Feed issues left and right. Now, 3S... It won't have any problem with that. Because it normally runs on 9 volts? I think it runs on 6 D cells, so 9, so going up to 12 isn't that much. Swampcat is doing well. She was harassing me. I think she wanted to go in the house and get food, but I still had darts. Yeah, all of the old AEBs have a pretty beefy motor in them. It was the only way to have enough torque to compress the springs, because it's even with the gearbox, it still has to compress that main spring enough to fire the darts. And if you geared it down enough to get more mechanical advantage, get more torque, you're going to lose rate of fire. So they could only gear it down so much, and so the motor did have to have some torque. So they put some pretty beefy motors in them. The downside to that is there aren't really any good upgrade motors. I went searching for upgraded Stampede motors back in the day, and I never found one. Now, part of that was probably because when I was searching, I did not have LiPo yet. And so the motors I were getting probably needed more current than I was giving them. And so they didn't have the power. They was wimpy. Alright. Getting down to the bottom here. See, now that would be awesome. There are metal gears for the Stampede out there, but unless you go to a half-dirt kit, the Stampede unfortunately suffers from what is referred to as diminishing returns. You keep putting more and more and more and more effort and energy and money into the Stampede, and the results get less and less and less. So it rapidly becomes not worth the effort. But it is just an iconic platform, and I love it. Oh, a swamp cat. Hello. Hello, I'm talking to strangers on the internet. I believe rival motors are also 360 motors. Tier has 380 motors that out of Darts found at some point and carried. I don't know if he still carries them. And that's how Tier was able to hold up to, 15 rounds a second for minutes at a time with no sag, because it's running big beefy 380 motors on a 3S, on a big old 3S, so it had plenty of current. Is this swamp cat? Running amok, no doubt, plotting my doom, as is her wont. It's a mess in here. I need to get this place cleaned up. Swamp Cat does not like being picked up. That's part of her feralness that she never lost. She doesn't like being picked up. She also doesn't much care for being in high places. She's a cave cat. She likes being under things and sneaking. When she does get in high places, she gets really aggressive about it. So the staircase that leads up to the attic in here, she'll be just at the top step and attack anything that tries to go underneath, which is usually my head. Good melee weapons. Not really. The Stalking Dead Katana is still one of my favorites. The old End Strike swords were fairly good, and they're generally allowed. The Marauder usually isn't allowed because it's much harder. Honestly, if you just go to Walmart, the foam swords that they have are actually pretty good, and they light up. There's a button that lights them up. Those aren't bad. If your event allows it, really your best option is to make one. Then you can get it to the specs that you want, the length you want, whatever. The Zombie Strike sword, yeah, I like the Zombie Strike machete. I like the Doomlands sword. Love the Doomlands sword because it's got handguard, and I'm a sucker for a handguard. The katana I like because it's really easy to slide into gear because it's straight and fairly short. Um, I've made molly attachments that can take them. I also just have loops on my battle belt that they can slide into, and that works perfectly fine. Does anyone still make kits for the long shot? Worker might. If you look for Terminator kit, the Terminator was just a long shot shell. Um, but they're hard to find these days. I've never used the chainsaw attachment. It's kind of bulky and awkward, and um, as a bayonet, no one's going to let you use it because you're going to hit them with the blaster on accident. But by itself, it might be allowed. It depends on how they feel about the fact that it's got a core. I love the idea of a Nerf technical pickup truck. I wanted to mount stuff on my golf cart, but the golf cart quit working, unfortunately, and I haven't gotten around to getting it repaired. Um, the real question is, where are you going to use it? I can't imagine any event would allow you to drive around in a truck because you might run over somebody. Um, but if you had an event that would allow it, that would be pretty cool. Or if you're just doing it for fun, just to have the Vulcan on it. Naturally, if I were doing that, I'd put a Moab on it. I mean, if you're gonna go all out, you could have basically 1,000 rounds of ammo if it was on a vehicle, because you wouldn't have to carry it. You'd have to print 1,000 rounds of Moab shell, which would take a month. Um, I don't think. I don't know that Out of Darts has the X Shot long shot plunger tube, but I'm pretty sure Silver Fox does. I know that's where I got mine. Silver Fox Industries has one. Out of Darts probably has one. Check their website, outofdarts.com. It's easy to find. A super unsafe boffer story. Did it involve me? Was I involved? Please tell me I wasn't involved. I'm curious. Tell the story. All right. Do one last check. I want 10,000 of these. But I have like 20. It's a fair number in here. I could probably go through and pick them all out and have 40. All right. Well, that's 2 bins full, and I still have a tote to go through. I think the trailer's locked. Talk amongst yourselves whilst I go find my keys. keys were located. I live in the middle of nowhere, and it has its disadvantages. But one of the advantages is I can leave my keys in the ignition and not have to worry at all that my car might get stolen. One to go. Oh no. This one might be a little too full. We're good. We're good. Just a little spillage. I doubt it. I'm willing to bet there are people who have more than I do. But I'm no slouch. I have a lot of darts. I am many things, but out of darts is not one of them. I couldn't possibly be him. He is prettier than I am. Much better hair. Yeah, so let's hear about the danger buffer. I have no doubt, if anywhere afterwards is definitely the sort of place where somebody would build a dangerous buffer. Finish. See, I find sorting darts to be very cathartic, almost therapeutic. Same with sorting Lego. And I do still have a lot of bulk brick that needs sorting. The issue is I'm starting to run out of room. I already need to expand several colors. I was able to get by separating the browns from the tans, but now I have so much of both that they're running out of room. I'm running out of room in green. I may have to keep an eye out, do a Goodwill run specifically looking for bins. But it would require a significant reorganization of some of my Lego room. I'm not sure how I would go about that. Recently did a major deep clean and sort of my Lego room. It had gotten so that I couldn't walk around in there, and that's just not acceptable. Let's see. You know, I could probably be talked into streaming brick sorting. Thing is, when I sort brick, I usually put on a movie. And I can't stream that. Huh. Does sound like something Uda would do. Make your rules specific, man. You would think, well, one, you would think you wouldn't have to tell somebody, no, you can't have something as dense as clay as your core material. But you also think that would be the sort of thing they would have in the rules. The core material must be one of the following, but... yeah, I have a feeling if I'd gotten into Afterworlds when I was younger, I would have been the result of a lot of rules. The cause of a lot of rules. I already was a cause for at least a few rules at Afterworlds. And that wasn't even trying. Well, it's late on a Friday night, and I'm streaming Sorting Darts, so that should tell you something about the state of my life. I haven't eaten since noon? Though I did have a big breakfast at noon. Also, the fact that I have breakfast at noon should tell you something about the state of my life. Up very late doing work stuff, and then up entirely too early doing work stuff. And now I'm up late again. I'm hoping I've got a bunch of stuff I need to do review videos on, so I'm hoping the weather is good this weekend. We are in the monsoon season, so clear days are few and far between. I can do the bench review stuff and then pray for a clear enough day to get out. And if not, well, I'll just have to clean up the shop enough to use the indoor range. Fortunately, there isn't really anybody who directly depends on me to take care of them. chicken. Did somebody at some point way up in the chat ask about root beer? I swear I saw a root beer comment, but then got distracted by a different comment, and then by the time I looked back, it had scrolled away. The drink for this thread that I haven't gotten around to is a Frosty's... No, Kansas City Sarsaparilla. Which I don't believe I've had yet. Ooh. Oh, that smells delicious. Mm. Oh, yeah. That is delightful. Smooth and creamy. Very, very good. Earlier this year, like around May, I decided I wanted to get serious about expanding my root beer collection, all the number of root beers that I had tried. And so I put out a call to folks, if you brought me root beer at an event, any root beer, didn't matter if I'd had it before or not, I would give you a button. And if you brought me a root beer that I hadn't had, you got a bigger button. And the first person to bring me a root beer that I hadn't had got a unique, special big button. And then I set out looking for root beer quests. And any time that I traveled, one of the things that I would look for were soda stores, soda shops that were likely to carry unique root beers. They're fairly common in big cities. There'll be some kind of a soda shop, or Rocket Fizz, or the Soda Pop Shop, or something like that. The neat thing about root beer is that it's very regional. Every area tends to have its own local special brand. Abita is down in Louisiana, and Sprecker's in Wisconsin, and I think St. Louis has Fizz. Is it Fizz that's in St. Louis? Anybody know? The big names, Barks and A&W and Mug, are everywhere because that's Pepsi, Coke, and Dr. Pepper's brands. The other thing I always look for whenever I travel is Lego stores, because Lego has a passport, and all of the stores have a unique stamp. So, and generally anywhere that I'm going to fly into, if it's big enough to have an a major airport, it's usually big enough to have a Lego store. So I bring my passport and try to get to the Lego store. Like when I went to Maryland Mayhem, I think we hit 4 or 5 Lego stores. And Survival Fest, I hit the one in Columbus, and when I went to Detroit, we hit a couple in Cleveland and in Detroit, and slowly getting my Lego passport filled out. But I also look for root beers. And my goal, when I started in May, I had about 60 root beers in my collection. And so my goal was to get to 100 by the end of the year. And I thought that was... I figured that was probably going to be doable. I might be able to pull that off. 100... I had to get 40 new root beers by the end of the year. I had 40 new root beers by the end of the month. I have 1919, actually. I recently got a hold of that. Very recently. And it was good. Yeah, you're not wrong. 1919 was a good root beer. Anyway, between people bringing me root beers, because I got brought a bunch of new root beers at Maryland Mayhem, somebody then told me where there was a soda shop that had a whole wall of root beer, and I bought so much I qualified for the bulk discount. And then Survival Fest, I think I got brought 9 more new root beers, which was very impressive. And when I went to Detroit, we snuck across to Canada. There was a soda shop just across the border in Canada that had a bunch that I didn't have before. Plus, I hit a soda shop and some other places. I found a couple of sources online that would ship root beer, and I was able to find some that had decent shipping. As you said, in some cases, I'd be buying $20 worth of root beer and it'd be $70 in shipping. You're like, no, that's too much. Have it on tap. Oh, you lucky dogs. But I found a few. And then I started to branch out. I started looking not only for root beer, but birch beer and sarsaparilla as well, because they're all the same. Just different names for. I'm sure 100 and some odd years ago, when they were actually making them with sarsaparilla or birch bark or whatever, they probably tasted significantly different. But this sarsaparilla just tastes like a really creamy root beer. There isn't anything that's particular. If you were to put 10 bottles in front of me, half of them birch beer, half of them sarsaparilla, or part of them root beer, I wouldn't be able to tell you which ones were birch beer, which ones were sarsaparilla, and which ones were root beer. Oh, that is good. That is good. I also, at first, I was only collecting root beers that were in glass bottles. Just because that looked good on display. And then I realized that I was being elitist and snobbish, and that I was denying myself all manner of excellent, potentially excellent root beers. And so I branched out. And what I do, like if it's in a can, at this point I'll just take a can. I don't have a problem with that. But occasionally, like this is a plastic bottle, and it's a large shape, and that's no good. However, I have a lot of extra empty glass bottles, so I will take the label off of this and glue it on a glass bottle. Problem solved. Then I branched even further, because at Detroit, somebody brought me a root beer that was made by a local hot dog stand. And they just brought it in a half-gallon jug. And it was really good, but I had absolutely no way of bringing that home with me. And it was just a blank half-gallon jug. So how do I put that in the collection? And so what I did is I went online and I found that hot dog stand, and the building had a neat mural on the side with the name of the hot dog stand and some art. And so I made my own label because I own a color printer. And so I just made my own label, glued it again onto a glass bottle, and voila, problem solved. And then it occurred to me that I knew that a lot of breweries, microbreweries, make their own root beer, but quite often it's only on tap. They make it in micro batches, small batches, and they don't bottle it or can it or sell it in any form except on tap at their tap house or their restaurant or whatever. And so I started looking around this area because the Pacific Northwest is festooned with breweries. And I started looking up the ones that had their own house root beer, and I started going to them. And again, I didn't have a bottle to put in the collection, so I started making my own bottles, or rather my own labels, because all of these microbreweries have a website, and they all have a logo, and so it's just a matter of taking the logo and adding color and matching fonts as best I could to add root beer to it, and it worked well. Anyway, long story summarized, I now have over 200 root beers in the collection. I currently have like 25 root beers, like bottles of root beer, new ones that I haven't tasted yet. I have a can of them, or I have a bottle of them. They're in my fridge or on my counter. And the problem is, despite what you might think from stories like this, I don't drink a lot of root beer. It's not like, coffee drinkers that drink coffee 2 or 3 times a day. I'll drink root beer once or twice a week with a meal. I don't just, go to the fridge and pop open a bottle of root beer and drink it because I'm thirsty. If I'm thirsty, I drink water. And so it takes me a long time to get through 30 new root beers. What's going on up here? Now feel free to leave. Yeah, I know it's late. It's 10:30 here, or 10 o'clock here, and I'm on the West Coast. You're on the East Coast. What, 1 a.m.? Feel free to go to sleep. Neat. I would love to try an actual birch beer. One that I acquired recently that I'd never even heard of, and a friend of mine who does his own brewing was like, oh yeah, that's a thing. I acquired a spruce beer. And I'm really curious what that's going to taste like. Like I said, most birch beers just taste like root beer. But I've never had a spruce beer. So I have no idea what kind of a flavor palette that's going to have. Or if it's just going to be, as you say, funky tasting root beer. There. Nope. There was a lot more full-length darts in this one than the last ones. I realize I've been burying the mega darts with full-length darts. I have to dig them back out. I kind of suspect that, yeah, it might taste pine-like. It's clear, so that's weird. Their birch beer was also clear, but their sarsaparilla wasn't. The brand is Empire. They make a root beer, a birch beer, a sarsaparilla. They make a lot of different sodas. On one of the places I ordered soda, they had something it sounded interesting. It sounded refreshing and delightful, so I got a bottle, and it turned out it was refreshing and delightful, and it was a mint ginger ale. And mint is something that's used in a lot of root beers, but it's usually wintergreen mint. This was spearmint, and it tasted like spearmint gum and ginger. It was really very nice and refreshing. And I let my younger sister try it. And at the time, she'd been eating a peppermint patty, and I was really curious how the spearmint was going to interact with the peppermint. And weirdly, apparently, they completely canceled each other out. And I tried it, and it was like, I took a bite of peppermint, all right, pepperminty, took a swig of the stuff that smelled like spearmint, and just no mint. It was baffling. I think that's most of the full lengths. Oh, there's one. All right. Oh yeah, no, it was delightful. I like ginger ale. Just I don't like well, I like something. Like if you have an upset stomach, ginger ale is fabulous, especially if you can get Bundaberg. And that stuff burns good going down, but it'll settle your stomach. All right, this is the one I think has the mega at the bottom. So let's. Sure enough. You would think after every event there would be fewer darts than we started with, but there are always more. as problems go, dart accumulation is definitely a better problem than dart attrition, but it's still a problem. Who's still here? Is there anyone still here watching me sort darts 1:30 in the morning? I thought you might be. Yeah. Swamp Cat's only ever slept on me once or twice. She generally sleeps by my feet. But she's not an overly snuggly cat. She likes pets. But she's not generally one to really snuggle. Once or twice, she's just plopped down right on my back or my chest. Usually it's my feet. Here's a question for those of you still malingering about. What sorts of videos would you like to see me make more of? Or go back to making? I used to have a really regular upload schedule and it's seriously fallen apart. Yeah, haven't had the opportunity to go to an Afterworlds. Udo hasn't needed us for anything. I keep meaning to reach out to him to float an idea of a shenanigan I would like to pull. But I haven't gotten around to it because I've had too much else going on to ponder Afterworlds. Yeah! I have not haven't done much with my Lego channel. I did 2 builds recently that I really should have videoed. I mean, I did the UCS A-Wing, but I started that on the Old Grey Bricks live stream, so I couldn't film it because I live stream on my camera, and I film in my Lego room on my camera. But I am still waiting for the final parts to arrive, so I might tear it apart and rebuild it on camera. And then the B-Wing. I finally broke down and started building as much of the B-Wing as I could. I had 90% of the parts, and most of the parts that I had were the structural parts. The stuff that I was missing was mostly the outer armor plating. Which has left it looking comical, because anytime a part is completely covered, Lego likes to use random colors. So there's a lot of whites and yellows and greens and blues and reds in the superstructure that then gets completely covered by the plating. But since I don't have the plating, my B-Wing is rather colorful. Yeah, that was actually really what kind of ended the Can It Take a K-26? There wasn't much mystery. All rival blasters could. No Dart Zone blasters could. No Hammer Prime blasters could. I refuse to give Hasbro money for N series, so I don't know, nor do I care if they can. There was talk, and I actually should revisit this. Out of Darts has acquired, or is working on getting upgrade springs for basically everything. And so the plan was to revisit past episodes of Can It Take a K-26, but now, especially ones that couldn't, and demonstrate that Out of Darts has an upgrade spring that does improve it and do all the same testing, but with the Out of Darts springs. So basically, is there an Out of Darts spring for that? Would be, basically the new series. They sponsored Can It Take a K-26. They gave me all the K-26 I was using. So it makes sense to just shift it to doing a video on every blaster they had a custom spring for, and doing it in the exact same format, and just, change the name. I really want to get back into doing reassembly videos, because those are ones I feel really good about making, because they help people. They're a useful tool for the hobby, a useful resource. And there are plenty of ones that I haven't done yet. I know people ask me to do the scavenger, and I'll probably go back to doing, a survey to figure out which one it is. this bin was supposed to just be half darts. There's sledge fire shells in here. What a mess. Mega rival. Not nearly enough room for how many half darts I'm about to try to shove in this bin. Why are there always more half darts? I wish I had that problem with Rival. I wish every event I went to I came back with 5 more gallons of Rival than I left with. Sadly, that is not the way of things. As it is, I sure ended up with a lot more half darts, or full-length darts than I started with, too. We tell people not to bring their own ammo, and then they do anyway. Don't be afraid of the Centurion. It's just a big stampede with no motor. The amount of fear-mongering that people have done around the Centurion is frankly comical. It's not easy to mod, unfortunately, because the whole plunger is solvent welded together. But it's not hard to actually open up and repair. As I said in the video. Though I'll be honest, I was right there with you. I was afraid to open that thing up too. And then I actually did. And then I came to understand the truth, and truth is the destroyer of fear. Well, reverse plunger, there's a number of things you can do. Obviously, most of the old reverse plunger blasters have a counterpart that is direct plunger. And you can usually swap the parts. But if you're going to do that, why not just use the new one? The other thing they used to do back in the day is good old power stacks. Put a spring behind the plunger to do what the spring normally does. At this point, those old reverse plunger blasters are coming up on 20 years old. A lot of them have gotten to the point that they're so worn out, there's no saving them. Or get cheeky. Shove Flywheel of the World System into it. Alright, this goes deeper than I thought. We're going to have to rethink this process. Side-scroller games. So most of them I enjoyed, you know, Mario and that like. There was one, Jazz Jackrabbit, made me incredibly motion sick. I think that was the first one that I discovered that certain video games make me motion sick. It was a really, really fast-paced side-scroller. Nerf Rewired was a good one. Thing is, there's really three. There's the three-switch rapid strike style, there's semi-auto, and there's two-switch full auto. And that's 95% of flywheel blasters. The only exceptions are going to be things like the regulator and the infamous, and there is no easy rewire on those except to turn them into one of the other two. You can turn an infamous or a regulator into a hyperfire or a rapid strike, but you lose the full auto capabilities, the select fire capabilities. Alright. We actually had a lot of Mega get used at this last game. There was a guy running a Centurion the entire day, which is fun. Alright. That's the overflow half darts. This is how many half darts don't fit in the bins they came in. Oh, jeez. I thought I was almost done. I was a fool to think thus. Alright. Yeah, AEB is just a hyperfire. Same wiring. Actually, it's simpler than a hyperfire. It's usually a one switch. Well, there often is two switches. It depends on how they're doing fire control. Like the Stampede is a one switch, but that's just because the bolt holds the switch down so that it keeps cycling after you let go of the trigger until it's completed the cycle. What do we got? Tave. Ah, yes. Listen, Titan rockets are just a matter of glue and foam. You cannot glue and foam worn out plastic parts. Rude. Who steals a man's shooter? Or someone stole Judd, the Aussie Nerf Cowboy's entire loadout out of his car. So I smuggled him a new one. Honestly, I would definitely go with the Boxer Pro. The Bew Blaster chain ones are all going to be very anemic compared to the Boxer. I understand people. I think the Boxer hits over 120 out of the box. People had to tweak them to get them down to lower FPSs. Though, if you're planning to use it at Afterworlds, that's a different story because they have a lower FPS than like our Nerf Wars do. Though our Mall Battle is a lower FPS, so because it's all close quarters. I have no idea. I know Worker made T-poles for them. I got a couple. I think I got them from RE Armory. There's ones that made Chronos. It was a barrel break, muzzle brake, as well as it expanded the magazine, so it got you one more round in the internal mag. Yep, still here. Found more darts to sort. I had a bin that I thought was just gonna be low on half darts, and it turned out it was full of unsorted darts. Dubious. Yeah, they're being wily. Trying to sneak through. FVJ sneaking in. Had a lot less trouble with those this year. But every once in a while, we get new people who bring their own ammo and bought it on Amazon or the dollar store or something, and we end up with a bunch more FEJs that gets into play, and every once in a while, one of them sneaks through our filter. We have a zero tolerance. If we find them in the field, we tear the head off and throw it away. No mercy shown to FEJs and Vowberries. Tell you a story. Oh. Many moons ago, back when I did medieval recreation, I was an angsty teenager, as one is wont to do when one is 18. And I wanted to play a bad guy. I wanted to play a pirate. And I wanted nothing to do with honor and chivalry. I thought these were foolish things that would get you killed in battle, being chivalrous. And so I chose not to get knighted, because you don't have to. If you don't want to. Adria was a point-based knighthood system. You had to have fought in a certain number of tournaments. You had to have won a certain number of tournaments. You had to have fought in a certain number of wars. And you had to have participated in a certain number of educational demonstrations. Either public demonstrations where we did stuff for the public, or you had to teach classes. As part of becoming a knight was you had to teach your knowledge or give back to the community or what have you. And I saw no point in being a knight. There were no benefits that I was interested in. If you became a high enough knight, you got a vote on the imperial estates, which made you a political entity in and of yourself. But I was young and dumb and didn't have any interest in that. But then I discovered that you weren't allowed to display heraldry, like a banner, unless you were a knight. So I couldn't fly my pirate flag. So I decided to go ahead and take the knighthood, but to be smarmy about it, as I was a smarmy individual, purely so I could fly my banner. But I'm also part magpie, and so once I had one of the shiny titles, I wanted all of the shiny titles. Well, there were 4 things you could get knighted in Adria: combat, target archery, arts and sciences, and ministry. Ministry being administration, being in charge of things. And it was mostly demonstrations. You had to teach classes or help run events or, you know, that sort of thing. Help the events take place. So I set out. I was already had all the points to get archery. I think archery is what I got my first knighthood in. I then got knighted in combat as a punishment, was the story. I got my knighthood in arts mostly through writing sonnets. Believe it or not, I used to write a lot of really, really bad poetry. Embarrassingly bad poetry. But it didn't have to be good, you just had to do it. So I got my knighthood in that. And eventually I had all four. And apparently, having all four was much less common than I had assumed. There was a special order for knights who had all four. And I thought you had to apply, and there was a process, and the existing members had to vote you in. And so I wrote my petition and all of this, and was informed that I was the first knight to have ever done that. It was basically just assumed that once you had all three, you were automatically in. Well, I'm not now. I was an extremely arrogant and braggadocious fellow back then. I've mellowed in my old age in ways that most of you will never understand because we didn't videotape everything back then. Learned from many a mistake, fortunately, and it's made me a better person. I've run out of things to sort, but I've also run out of bins to put stuff that I've sorted in. I got all four knighthoods. Eventually made it as high as second level knight, which meant I had a vote on the local estates. If I'd stayed in just a little bit longer, I would have made it to third level, at which point I would have had a vote at the imperial level, which I definitely should not have been trusted with. If I'd stayed in that group too much longer, there's a chance I would have ended up emperor, and that would have been disastrous. So, in some ways, I'm glad I left. Other things, I would love to get back into it, but I haven't been able to find. I think the local chapters that used to be in this area collapsed during COVID. I've reached out to the people that are supposedly in charge and gotten no information back, so I have no idea if they're still around. I would love to get back into sword fighting. It was such a wonderful way to relieve stress. Unlike hitting someone upside the head with an axe to, let some angst out. Plus, I need to get back into shape. I've gotten terribly out of shape. Yeah, having lived through a plague, nothing is the same as it was before. So many things are just completely different than they were before. Hello. Swamp Cat has come to harass me. Yes. Yes. Some things made it through. Some things were lost that were better lost. Other things were lost that the world is less for. Swamp Cat has informed me it is time to go in. It is late. She is hungry. I'm hungry. I should go get some food. So, thank you all for joining me and for your questions and your comments and your support and all of that. It's very greatly appreciated. I will have to figure out what on earth I'm going to do with all these extra darts. It's gotten messy out here. Projects lead to mess. But the year is over, so I need to go through my loaner bin and make sure everything's still working, see what's jammed and what needs repair and what needs upgrading or downgrading. Also figure out what doesn't need to be in there. There's plenty of stuff that probably never got used over the course of the year, and I need to look at it and either decide, all right, we need to make sure that we use this next year, or just take it out because it's just taking up space. The trailer is completely at capacity, and I usually end up bringing more stuff than even will fit in the trailer. I've contemplated looking at, okay, what's the next size up? I like how small the trailer is because it drives like there's no trailer, which is really nice. We can usually find parking. It's not so big that it's a problem, but I would like to carry more cover, and there's just no more room. I usually end up bringing 2 extra totes of darts that don't fit in the trailer. I've got a tote of half darts and a tote of full darts, but we've started doubling that. All right, I gotta go. Swamp Cat is getting aggressive. Okay, again, thank you all. Have a lovely evening. I will see you